Hi, welcome to our YouTube-friendly version of NTD News. What you'll see here is only the content that YouTube allows. For our complete, uncensored broadcast, head on over to ntd.com, and you can click on the link below. See you there. Former President Trump is set to make his first court appearance tomorrow in the January 6th case. That's as he says he's never had so much support following his third indictment. Joining us now live is NTD's Iris Tao from outside of the courthouse. Iris, what should we expect to see tomorrow?
Hey, good evening, Steph. You're right. So, former President Trump, according to this 45-page indictment that was handed down yesterday, is facing 4 criminal charges over his alleged involvement in the January 6th incident. And on Thursday, he's expected to be arraigned here at the federal courthouse right behind me here in Washington, D.C. And what will happen is that he will have the charges against him read to him by a judge, and then he's expected to plead not guilty. And today, in preparation for the proceeding tomorrow, the Secret Service says is working with Capitol Police as well as local authorities trying to ensure Trump's safety during tomorrow's proceeding. And of course, we all know that today a big incident happened just a few blocks away from here. A Senate building was evacuated after a bogus 911 call about a potential active shooter there. And of course, nothing happened today, but we do expect to see a massive security presence tomorrow.
Definitely a lot to watch for tomorrow. So, Iris, how's Trump responding ahead of his arraignment? What are his lawyers saying?
So Trump today again lashed out at this latest indictment. He posted to social media saying, quote, "This unprecedented indictment has awoken the world to the corruption, scandal, and failure that has taken place in the United States for the past 3 years." And he added that he has, quote, "never had so much support on anything before after yesterday's indictment." And that's as Trump's legal team also laid out their part of their defense strategy today, which is focused on the First Amendment. Watch.
And our defense is going to be focusing on the fact that what we have now is an administration that has criminalized the free speech and advocacy of a prior administration during the time that there is a political election going on. That's unprecedented.
And on the prosecution side, the judge in charge of this case, which is Tanya Chukin, she's known for her harsh sentencing of January 6th defendants. And of course, when it comes to the jury, Trump's lawyers today suggested that they might want to move the trial out of D.C. because the jury here might not be as friendly to Trump. Steph.
All right, thanks so much for that update, Iris. Great to hear. And lawmakers and presidential candidates are reacting to the latest indictment against former President Trump. What are they saying about the charges, and what are they promising to do?
Reactions poured in after a grand jury in D.C. indicted former President Trump on 4 felony charges in relation to the 2020 elections. In a joint statement, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer and House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said, quote, "This indictment is the most serious and most consequential thus far and will stand as a stark reminder to generations of Americans that no one, including a president of the United States, is above the law. The legal process must continue to move forward without any outside interference." In a post on Twitter, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy referenced the House investigation into Hunter Biden's business dealings. He wrote, quote, "Everyone in America could see what was going to come next." DOJ's attempt to distract from the news and attack the frontrunner for the Republican nomination, President Trump. Republican presidential candidates offered a more varied response to the indictment. Former Vice President Mike Pence said in a statement, quote, "Today's indictment serves as an important reminder. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States."
I did my duty that day. And as I stand for the Republican nomination for president, I want them to know, whatever it means to me, I'll always stand on the Constitution of the United States of America. Look, our country is more important than any one man.
Entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy condemned the indictment as un-American and said he would pardon Trump if elected.
It would be easier for me if Donald Trump were eliminated from competition. That's not how I want to win. This is not about politics to me. This is about first principles. We do not want to become a country where the party in power is able to use banana republic-like tactics to eliminate its political opponents.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis didn't mention Trump or the specifics of the charges in his statement, but commented that it's unfair to have to stand trial before a jury in Washington, D.C. He promised to, quote, end the weaponization of government, replace the FBI director, and ensure a single standard of justice for all Americans. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
As mentioned earlier, Trump faces arraignment in his third indictment tomorrow. He's been charged with attempting to overturn the 2020 election. So NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards is here to break down the charges.
With two other indictments waiting in the wings and charges looming in Georgia, former President Trump is prepared to face a third indictment in a Washington courtroom on Thursday. Trump was indicted Tuesday on 4 counts, including conspiring to defraud the U.S., obstructing an official proceeding, and conspiring to deprive voters of their right to fair elections. The charges, announced by special counsel Jack Smith, stem from a years-long investigation into allegations that the former president attempted to overturn the 2020 election. Now, in a 45-page indictment, federal prosecutors accuse Trump and a list of 6 unnamed co-conspirators of a multi-state conspiracy, culminating from false claims of widespread election fraud. It states that Trump knowingly spread lies in an effort to maintain power, and that he knew his claims were false, yet continued to proclaim that he was the rightful winner. The conspiracy charges hinge on allegations that Trump and his allies pressured state and federal officials to throw out the election results, which ultimately resulted in the breach of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. The indictment states that one way the co-conspirators attempted to obstruct the electoral proceedings was by organizing fraudulent slates of electors, and that the so-called fraudulent electors attempted to mimic procedures that legitimate electors were supposed to follow. A former state prosecutor told me in a previous interview that it's not illegal to submit a second slate of electors to Congress.
That's something that's happened throughout the history of the nation, is that there's been competing slates of electors that have been sent to Congress, and it's Congress that decides whether or not which slate that they're going to accept. This dates back to 1870 or so.
3 state and local prosecutors are similarly investigating allegations of so-called fake electors. Last month, Michigan's Attorney General filed felony charges against 16 fake electors accused of aiding Trump in attempts to overturn the 2020 election results. Georgia's Fulton County prosecutor Fani Willis recently expanded her investigation to include fake electors. And Arizona's Attorney General also began an investigation into fake electors last month. Earlier this year, the Manhattan prosecutor indicted Trump, alleging that he falsified business records to hide hush money payments to an adult film actress. The actress had claimed she had an affair with Trump years ago. In June, Smith's office charged Trump with illegally retaining classified documents after leaving the White House and obstructing efforts to retrieve them. And in Georgia, Willis has been investigating whether Trump and others illegally interfered with that state's election. Willis, an elected Democrat, is expected to bring charges within the next 3 weeks. Steph?
Thanks, Arlene. And here to offer his analysis of the latest indictment is former federal prosecutor and Republican candidate for the Attorney General of Missouri, Will Scharf, whom I spoke with earlier today. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Trump's being accused of 4 counts in his latest indictment. You allege that there are serious legal infirmities within each of these counts. I'd like to start with the conspiracy to defraud the United States. How could Trump's intentions be legally proven, and how could he disprove it? What's your take on this?
Sure. So there are 3 conspiracy counts in this indictment. With respect to all 3, the government is going to have to prove really tricky details about not just President Trump's state of mind, but also his alleged co-conspirators' states of mind. So if Trump and his alleged co-conspirators did not, if they believed the theories that they were promoting, if they believed that the election had in fact been stolen, then there is no ground for conviction here. That's the trickiest part of this case to me, is that it really comes down to what was inside President Trump's mind And I just don't think they have the facts to prove that his mental state was criminally culpable.
Right, and there's an allegation within these conspiracies to deprive the people of the right to have their votes counted. Where do you see the holes in that argument?
So that count in particular, it's been primarily used historically in cases where people have filed false votes, where there have been conspiracies among election officials to rig elections, essentially. Here, again, the government will have to show that President Trump and his legal team were advancing theories that they knew to be false, were providing facts that they knew to be false to state officials, and that they had a criminal intent, that their goal here was actually depriving people of their right to vote. That's just an incredibly high bar to meet. And you have to figure that in front of any fair judge and jury, the special counsel is certainly going to have an uphill battle meeting those requirements to prove their case.
And Trump's legal team is calling the push for a speedy trial within 90 days absurd. And you've also said that the timing seems suspect. What concerns you about it?
Yeah, so we saw the same thing with the documents case out of Mar-a-Lago that was also brought by special counsel Jack Smith. He's repeatedly stood up in front of the American people and said that these cases are ready for trial. These cases need to go to trial now. In this case, this relates to conduct that occurred over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. President Trump was already impeached and then acquitted for the conduct that's at issue here. To my way of thinking, there's no reason why this case had to be brought now as opposed to 1.5 years ago or as opposed to 2 years in the future. There's no reason why this case has to proceed during a presidential election. And the fact that they've brought it when they have really speaks to certainly an appearance of impropriety and an appearance of political timing, if not actual impropriety and actual political considerations having gone into the decision to bring this indictment now.
Considering your assessment of the charges, how do you see this playing out in the courts?
You know, I am confident that if this case were to reach the United States Supreme Court, that the United States Supreme Court would dismiss some or all of the charges brought in this indictment, just based on the legal infirmities, based on the real legal issues with Jack Smith's theory of this prosecution. The question is, what's the path? And unfortunately, the pathway seems to be through a D.C. Circuit Court judge who was an Obama appointee, who's been very unfair to many January 6th defendants, and potentially through a D.C. jury. Washington, D.C. is probably the most left-wing jurisdiction in the United States. It's very tough to see how President Trump gets a fair trial. So even though the end result may be fair and may be just, I think the path to get there may do terrible damage to our democracy and to the rule of law.
Now, you mentioned some of the other cases against Trump right now. How does this third indictment differ from the other two, in your opinion?
Well, for one thing, this indictment relates to acts that the president committed while he was in office, and largely acts that he's already been impeached and acquitted for by the House of Representatives and by the United States Senate. That's a key differentiator here, that unlike the documents case, which relates to President Trump's conduct after he left office, this gets into core issues of separation of powers, of presidential privilege, of presidential immunity. I think that, perhaps more than anything else, raises real questions as to whether this case should have been brought at all.
All right. Thank you so much, Will Scharf. Great to hear your thoughts.
Always great to join you.
And next, a federal grand jury today sentenced the Pittsburgh synagogue shooter to death. Robert Bowers killed 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018. It's the first federal death penalty handed down under the Biden administration. According to testimony, Bowers yelled at the scene, quote, "All these Jews need to die." In June, jurors found the 50-year-old guilty of all 63 charges, including federal hate crime charges. Today, the federal jury voted unanimously to recommend that Bowers be put to death. In federal capital punishment cases, all 12 jurors have to agree to a death sentence. In the sentencing phase, prosecutors argued that Bowers carefully planned the attack and deliberately targeted elderly worshipers. He has also expressed no regret. Defense attorneys argued that Bowers suffers from major mental illness. Most of the victims' families said that he deserved to be put to death for his crimes. The DOJ under Biden has paused all death penalties, so it's unclear when the sentencing will be carried out. The director of an anti-gun violence program is being hit with gun and drug charges. His organization was in partnership with the city of New York to end shootings. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the details.
The head of Bronx Rises Against Gun Violence, or BRAC, is being accused of supplying drugs to dealers in upstate New York. Police reportedly raided his home last week when they found drugs, over $160,000 in cash, and 2 illegal firearms. The individual in question is 48-year-old Michael Rodriguez. His arrest comes after a 2-year investigation, after which officials reportedly seized over 1.5 kilograms of crack cocaine. The Bronx District Attorney commented, saying the charges are shocking and disturbing, especially since he has attended anti-violence events and peace marches portraying himself as someone who cares about stopping violence in our community. To learn more about this case, I spoke with Joe Imperatrice, who's the founder of Blue Lives Matter NYC and a sergeant with the NYPD.
What do you make of this story? What do you make of those charges? I mean, were you shocked when you first heard about this?
Well, this is nothing new. This is just stuff that doesn't make the media. It happens fairly often. The majority of these violence interrupters and people that are in charge of these so-called anti-violence groups tend to be people that are known to the streets, known to be criminals. So this is not shocking. Unfortunately, it's going to continue to happen.
What's more, last year, the city of New York released this blueprint to end gun violence. The city listed Bronx Rises Against Gun Violence as a community partner. Mayor Eric Adams previously talked about relying on community organizations for safety instead of the police. Other mayors across the nation made similar statements during the Defund the Police movement.
Should the city do a better job in terms of conducting background checks and see who they're working with?
I don't think it has to do with background checks. I think it should be stricter policies. I think certain people should not be eligible for these programs. I think cities like New York and large cities need to work more closely with their police departments. At the end of the day, it's going to be police officers that drive down crime while working with community members that want to help the police with no incentives involved.
A spokesperson for BRAC reportedly commented on the charges, saying, "While we work to learn more, our primary focus remains on the communities we serve and our programs that are helping to keep them safe." Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Fitch Ratings downgraded the U.S. credit rating on Tuesday from the highest AAA rating to AA+. Fitch says it sees a steady deterioration in standards of governance on fiscal and debt matters in the U.S. For further insights, NTD Business's Don Ma talks with an economic analyst.
And now joining me is Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst at bankedrate.com. So Mark, maybe just help us put this into perspective. Just paint a picture for us.
Obviously, one of the 3 major rating agencies is raising a bit of a question here about the U.S. fiscal position. And I think, if anything, the timing of this announcement from Fitch seemed a bit odd because it's referencing everything from the January 6th insurrection and uprising on Capitol Hill, which is 2 years in the rearview mirror, and even, apparently alluding, if not just outright referencing, some things that happened in the previous administration. And while there may be some people who take issue with what Fitch has done, I don't really think that there is a lot here that really surprises anybody in the sense of raising questions about the sustainability of U.S. debt and deficits. And this is something that 2 Federal Reserve chairs ago, Ben Bernanke was talking about over a decade ago when we had a downgrade by S&P. And so to the degree that this could lead to more constructive conversations, more civil conversations about where the U.S. Fiscal position ought to be, that could be a good thing. Do we have a high degree of confidence that all those discussions can be civil and constructive? Well, I guess what we'll say about that is let's see what happens.
So in your opinion, do you think this downgrade of U.S. credit rating from Fitch, do you think this is justified?
Well, that's a decision for them to make. I mean, they're a rating agency, and that's their job. But I do think the timing is somewhat suspect. But I think at the same time, the long-term observations aren't really necessarily things that many people would take issue with. We're talking about the rising level of debt to GDP that we have in this country that cannot continue to rise at this rate.
All right, and I think we should address if there's going to be a long-term impact to this downgrade. I think we should start off with what has been the reaction in the stock market.
I would say, other than a kind of garden variety sell-off as we speak, I would say there's been not much reaction at all. And I think the reason for that is, first of all, it's not our first rodeo with respect to a downgrade. We did have a rather severe reaction when this happened at the hands of Standard & Poor's over a decade ago. But ultimately, everybody moved past that, and the government went about continuing to fund its business and moving on forward with debt and deficits as it did over those many years to come. And this just doesn't feel nearly as momentous as that event. For among other things, we don't really have a pending crisis here in the coming days and weeks with respect to a default.
All right, if we do get a consensus between the major ratings agencies, would there be a bigger impact then, in your opinion?
I think that would be a much more serious situation. As I said, this is sort of an experiment that is continuing to play itself out in real time. You can almost say, I don't want to say so far so good with avoiding, the calamity that we were talking about a few months ago, but, in the sense that Fitch just seems to have, without being a spokesman for them, to have come out with this decision with odd timing. I'm sure the other ratings agencies are taking note of this and making their own assessments about where they want to be. But obviously, so far, there hasn't been an event per se recently that has triggered those kinds of decisions on the other two, being Moody's and S&P.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Mark.
Thank you, Don.
New hires are struggling with basic skills because the pandemic lockdowns stunted their educational experiences. How are businesses dealing with the current workforce? NTD's Colin Frederickson takes a look.
New job hires are having a difficult time after years of learning from home. ACT CEO Janet Godwin says more high school graduates lack the fundamental skills needed for college and work. Students who were already doing poorly are now doing far worse. Companies have to teach new hires things like how to look at people when talking to them, how to make change at a cash register, how to dress appropriately, cell phone etiquette, even basic hygiene. Pass rates on assessment exams have all gone down. For nurses, soldiers, office workers, and engineers, the ones who make it through still have a hard time adapting.
It's important for leaders of organizations, no matter what kind, if it's an educational institution, an employer, a house of worship, it's important that we have to work even harder to create spaces that are safe and supportive.
Consultant Corinthia Barber has helped people transition from staying home all day to a work environment. She sees anxiety as a key theme among her clients. The world they see around them is different from what they got used to, both during and before the lockdowns.
Communication is everything. Sometimes we avoid communicating, verbalizing our concerns.
Psychologist Michelle Leno has also helped people readjust. She says it's important for workers to talk to their supervisors or colleagues about the challenges they're facing. Bringing these up may be difficult, but it may also be necessary.
And if we do not talk about it, if we don't address it and we avoid it, it just kind of builds and builds and builds and adds to our anxiety.
Experts suggest that businesses should stop hiring people based on skills because right now many prospects don't have the necessary skills. Businesses should instead hire based on applicants' motivation to learn. Colin Frederickson, NTD News.
A heavy downpour helped firefighters battling a massive blaze in California and Nevada. But meteorologists warn that sudden and erratic wind shifts could endanger crews later on.
According to the National Weather Service, the 15-minute downpour early Tuesday helped firefighting efforts at the Mojave National Preserve. But thunderstorms could pose problems if they pass over the area. The York fire was partially contained by Tuesday morning after igniting last week and spreading into Nevada. The flames scorched tens of thousands of acres of desert scrub, juniper, and Joshua tree woodland.
The Mojave National Preserve is a complex and sometimes delicate ecosystem, and so we're implementing what are called MIST tactics, which is minimal impact suppression tactics. Now, this is a full suppression fire. We are absolutely going after this fire on all fronts, but we use these MIST tactics so we cut just enough line to be able to control the fire, and we don't get too crazy with it. We're not using bulldozers or any other kind of mechanized equipment. And so we're being very careful of what we refer to as being light on the land.
Now the largest wildfire of the season in California, the blaze was mapped at over 82,000 acres on Wednesday morning, with 30% containment.
We're one team, one fight. So we've got resources from California, we've got resources from Nevada, from the Park Service, from BLM, from a variety of local government agencies as well. And you mentioned CAL FIRE, they're with us here as well.
People said the fire started on private property, but the cause is unknown. The investigation is ongoing.
Continuing with the indictment of the former president, a judge known for handing out tough sentences to January 6 defendants has been assigned to the case. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on District Judge Tanya Chutkan.
Judge Tanya Chutkan has doled out stricter sentences than the Justice Department called for in 7 January 6 cases. She honored its requests in 4 others and sent all 11 Capitol breach defendants who came before her behind bars. In 4 cases in which prosecutors weren't even seeking jail time, Chutkan handed out sentences ranging from 14 days to 45 days. The Associated Press called Chutkan the toughest punisher, saying she has consistently taken the hardest line against January 6 defendants of any judge serving on Washington's federal trial court. In comparison, 20 judges who have sentenced Capitol breach defendants have handed out lighter sentences than prosecutors were seeking in about 75% of cases. No other judge apart from Chutkan has exceeded prosecutors' recommended punishment in most of the cases assigned to them. Chutkan has repeatedly spoken out in very strong terms against the events of January 6th. The Jamaica native has served as a federal judge since she was appointed by former President Barack Obama in 2014. After graduating from University of Pennsylvania Law School, Chutkan spent more than a decade working as a public defender in Washington, D.C. At a sentencing hearing in October 2021, she said those who participated in the January 6th breach soiled and defaced the halls of the Capitol and showed their contempt for the rule of law. At the same hearing, she rejected comparisons between January 6th and the 2020 BLM protests, saying to compare the actions of people around the country protesting mostly peacefully for civil rights to a violent mob seeking to overthrow the lawfully elected government is a false equivalency and downplays the very real danger that the crowd on January 6th posed to our democracy. At least 14,000 people were arrested in the BLM protests, and more than 19 people died in relation to the unrest. Arson, vandalism, and looting caused approximately $1 to $2 billion in damages. Before sentencing 2 friends who came to the Capitol, Chutkan said, "This wasn't Bill and Ted's excellent adventure," calling their actions an assault on the American people. She added, "This was a violent attempted overthrow of the government, and it almost succeeded." Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And now our Daniel Monahan has more on Trump's alleged possible co-conspirators.
The 6 alleged co-conspirators are not named in the indictment and have not been charged by special counsel Jack Smith, but their detailed descriptions hint at their identity. Possible alleged co-conspirator number 1 is Rudy Giuliani. The former New York City mayor and Trump's former personal attorney played a prominent role in sharing theories of widespread fraud in the 2020 election and spoke at an event outside the White House on January 6, 2021. Number 2, attorney John Eastman, who represented Trump in a lawsuit to overturn voting results in 4 states. Eastman wrote a series of legal memos which claimed that former Vice President Mike Pence could reject electors from certain states to deny Democrat Joe Biden a majority of the Electoral College vote. Number 3, attorney Sidney Powell, part of a legal team that filed unsuccessful lawsuits seeking to overturn election results. She has been sued for defamation by the voting companies over claims she made about them rigging the 2020 election against Trump. Tuesday's indictment described someone with similar characteristics, claiming that Trump privately told others that the election fraud claims by this alleged co-conspirator sounded crazy, but that he still embraced and publicly amplified the allegations. Possible alleged co-conspirator number 4, former high-ranking Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark. Clark allegedly tried to convince Trump to oust acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen so that he could take over the department. The alleged plan was then to pursue Trump's claims by opening an investigation into voter fraud in Georgia and other swing states. Number 5, attorney Kenneth Chesebro, who allegedly helped devise a plan to submit fake slates of electors for Trump to obstruct Congress's certification of the election results. Possible alleged co-conspirator number 6 is currently not clear based on the information in the indictment. The person is described as a political consultant. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And now for your sports news. Here's NTD's Dave Martin with a rare piece of sports history up for sale.
That's right, Steph. Wilt Chamberlain's 1972 NBA Finals jersey will be up for auction at Sotheby's at the end of this month, with the auction house expecting the bidding to reach in the neighborhood of $4 million. Chamberlain, a Hall of Famer considered to be one of the greatest players in league history, wore the jersey in Game 2 as well as the clinching Game 5 as the Lakers finally broke through with the title over New York. The championship was their 6th in franchise history, but broke a long drought after being stopped in the finals 8 times in the previous 13 seasons, with 7 of those coming against Boston. Now, should this jersey sell for the projected $4 million, it would fall well below the record $10.1 million paid for a Michael Jordan Finals jersey a year ago. Yet it would likely be the most ever paid for a piece of Chamberlain memorabilia, topping the $1.8 million that a jersey from his rookie season went for earlier this summer. And in college sports, the Pac-12 is considering a media deal with Apple TV, according to multiple sources. The leaders of the remaining 9 universities of the Power Conference were presented with several options in a meeting Tuesday night, though no vote was taken. Terms of the proposed deal haven't been made public, but would go into effect after the 2023-24 season. The beleaguered conference has already lost flagship schools UCLA and USC last summer to the Big Ten, while Colorado recently announced that they're leaving for the Big 12, with money or lack of it likely a major factor. Meanwhile, the Big 12 reportedly has interest in adding another school to ultimately give them 14 members. And for your sports viewing schedule tonight, 9 baseball games are on, including a Yankees-Rays matchup with Cy Young contenders Garrett Cole and Shane McClanahan on the mound. Cole leads the league in ERA, while McClanahan's 11 wins are second in the AL. And that's it for your sports news today. Steph, back to you.
Thanks, Dave. And next, the first Tuesday of every August is National Night Out. This is the day for police officers from all across the country to build relationships with local communities. NTD Sam Wang brings us more from Washington, D.C.
Peace and joy at the nation's capital. It was all made possible when local police officers walked into the very crowd they protect and serve, showing their neighbors who they are behind the badge.
National Night Out showed law enforcement that you have to be part of the community, you have to interact with them, and you have to be a member and listen to them and be a partner.
The National Night Out is an annual event that seeks to build connections between police and neighborhoods, and that relationship is needed more so than ever as inner city crime rate continues to climb. Just recently, the Mexican consulate in Washington, D.C. stepped in to address the concern, warning Mexican nationals that parts of the city are no longer considered safe. Violent crime in the D.C. area has surged by a staggering 36% compared to the same time last year, and just homicide alone is up by 15%. Councilmember Brooke Pinto told me that the public's trust in police is the foundation to improving safety.
The more community trust and relationships people have with our police, the safer our city will be, the more likely people are to report an incident of crime or report suspicious activity.
At the event, residents are able to take part in safety demonstrations set up by first responders, as well as block parties, live music, bounce beds, cookouts, and many more.
And I see you got some pretty good food out here. So how does it feel catering to the communities?
It's cool. It's busy. So it's kind of helpful. People know what they want when they come, but they don't always know what they want, but it's okay.
Many have tables set up on the site. This is Dwayne Harper. He's out here showing folks a new video platform.
What is this platform that you guys are trying to introduce to people?
Well, this platform is called Ganjin World. It's a clean platform that has no harmful content on there, no criminal activity, and is good for children and adults and individuals. And we encourage everyone that comes to the event to post about their experience about the event. We have a lot of vendors out here, our table, some of the vendors over here, great food. Post about your experience.
All 7 police districts across Washington, D.C. have hosted events during the later afternoon and evening hours. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
And lastly, if you have any news tips or feedback for our show, remember that you can email us at eveningnews@ntd.com. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. Good night.